My name is Ryan, and I've been driving trucks for nearly 15 years now. I've hauled cargo across countless states, traveled millions of miles, and witnessed just about everything the American highways can offer, from breathtaking sunrises over the mountains to eerie, lifeless rest stops in the middle of nowhere. But of all the nights I've spent on the road, there's one that continues to haunt me. It happened a few years ago, in the fall of 2019, just outside of West Memphis, Arkansas. At the time, I was making a run from Dallas to Nashville, hauling a load of fresh produce that was already behind schedule. The clock was pushing close to midnight, and fatigue was starting to set in. I knew I needed to rest, or I'd be risking a mistake behind the wheel. I decided to pull off at a Flying J truck stop just off I-40, a place I'd visited a handful of times before. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but it was familiar. That night, though, it felt different. Right next to the truck stop was an old, dimly lit diner called Roy's Diner. It looked like it had been standing there since the 1960s, with its flickering neon sign and fogged-up windows. I'd eaten there once or twice in the past. Greasy food, lukewarm coffee, nothing special, but it had a weird charm to it. Still, there was something about the air that night that felt off, thick, heavy, like the kind of silence you only notice in cemeteries or abandoned buildings. With me was my loyal dog, Noodles. He's a mixed breed with more road miles than most people. Usually, the second I stop the truck, he curls up on the passenger seat and dozes off. But this time, he was alert, his ears perked, nose twitching, eyes locked on something beyond the windshield. He let out a low growl, not aggressive, just cautious. It was the first sign that something wasn't right. The parking lot was nearly empty, which was strange in itself. Normally, you'd find at least a dozen rigs parked for the night, engines humming, drivers chatting, maybe a few walking toward the diner for a late bite. But that night, nothing. Just the dim glow of overhead lights and the distant hum of the interstate. It was unnervingly quiet. I stepped out of the truck, stretching my legs, and tried to shake the unease off. It's just another long night, I told myself. I gave Noodles a pat on the head, locked up, and walked toward the diner. Inside, the air smelled of burnt grease and stale coffee. A lone waitress stood behind the counter, absently wiping down the same spot over and over again. There was only one other customer, a pale, elderly man sitting in the far corner, staring blankly out the window. I gave the waitress a nod and took a booth a few rows away from the old man. I ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of pie, mostly just to keep myself awake. The waitress barely spoke, and the silence stretched long and uncomfortable. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but there was no signal. That was unusual for a place like this. Then I noticed something. The old man hadn't moved an inch since I walked in. Not to sip from the glass of water in front of him, not to blink, not even to shift his gaze. It was as if he were frozen in time. The waitress didn't acknowledge him either. She never asked if he needed anything or checked on him, almost like he wasn't really there. I felt a chill creep down my spine. When I finally left the diner and stepped back into the cool night air, I found Noodles pacing in the truck, agitated. As I approached, I noticed something even more unsettling. There were fresh footprints in the dew-covered pavement leading from the woods behind the diner straight toward my rig, and then back into the trees, but no one else had entered the lot since I'd arrived. I didn't waste any time. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away from that truck stop, I glanced at the diner one last time. The neon sign was off. The windows were dark, and the building looked abandoned, as if it had been for years. To this day, I don't know what I walked into that night. Was it a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, some glitch in time, or something far more sinister? All I know is, I never stopped there again. We were both rushed to the nearest hospital. I remember sitting in the back of the ambulance, staring blankly out the rear windows as we pulled away from the accident scene. Balkal, ये रहा वही स्क्रिप्ट बगैर किसी तब्दीली के दोबारा तहरीर किया गया है. We were both rushed to the nearest hospital. I remember sitting in the back of the ambulance, staring blankly out the rear windows as we pulled away from the accident scene. That's when it really hit me. I broke down completely. The weight of what had happened came crashing down like a ton of bricks. I couldn't stop thinking about the people in that white pickup, the fear they must have felt in those final seconds, seeing a fully loaded semi hurtling toward them with no time to escape. It haunted me then, and it haunts me still. At the hospital, everything was a blur. Doctors asking questions, nurses checking vitals, John sitting across from me in a daze. Eventually, we were told the news. All three occupants of the pickup had died instantly. A man, his wife, and their little girl, just 4 years old. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been sitting on the floor of the cab during the impact, and yet I'd walked away with barely a scratch. Why them? Why not me? The guilt was overwhelming. In the weeks that followed, I replayed that night over and over in my head. I remembered John's joke before he went to sleep. If we get killed, I'll come back to haunt you. At the time, it seemed like a harmless joke between tired drivers. But after the crash, the words echoed with eerie weight. John and I never really talked about it after that night. It was like we had both decided, without saying it, to bury the memory as deep as we could. But it never stayed buried for long. Months later, I had to pass that same stretch of highway again. My palms were sweating on the wheel, my breath shallow. When I saw the section where the accident had occurred, I noticed something different. The road had been repaired. The grooves that had caused us to hydroplane were gone. Fresh asphalt lay in smooth black lines across what had once been a deadly patch of pavement. I pulled over and just stared at it for a while. It was too late for the family we lost, but maybe it would save someone else. That highway is known among truckers as Blood Alley for a reason. It's seen more crashes than most people realize. Dangerous curves, poor drainage, and years of neglect turned it into a death trap. I can't help but think, if only the road had been fixed sooner. If only we had taken a different route. If only John hadn't lost control for those few seconds. But if only doesn't bring people back. I still drive today, though not as often. And every time it rains, I grip the wheel a little tighter, stay a little more alert. That night changed me. It reminded me that even when you're doing everything right, things can still go horribly wrong. The road has its ghosts, and some of them ride with you, whether you know it or not. A few weeks after the crash, I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing phantom tires screeching, glass shattering, and the distant wail of sirens that weren't really there. I began avoiding night routes altogether. Every time the rain came down, my chest tightened, my hands grew clammy, and I felt that same sense of helplessness from the night of the accident creeping back in. One night, I was driving through the Midwest on a long-haul job. I hadn't been on the road in over a month, and I was determined to push through. It was a cold, misty night, light drizzle tapping on the windshield. I turned off the radio. I couldn't focus. My thoughts were drifting again, always back to that family, that pickup, that stretch of cursed road. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, on the side of the highway, just barely visible in my headlights, stood a little girl. She wasn't moving, just standing still in the rain with her arms by her side, staring directly at my truck. She wore a soaked pink dress clinging to her small frame. Her dark hair was matted to her forehead. I slammed the brakes and swerved onto the shoulder. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my flashlight and jumped out of the cab, calling out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" But when I reached the spot where I saw her, there was nothing. No girl. No footprints. Just the endless drizzle falling onto wet asphalt. I searched the surrounding area with my light for a few minutes, but there was no sign of anyone. It was as if she had vanished, or had never been there to begin with. Shaken, I climbed back into the truck and locked the doors. I sat there for a long moment, trying to calm down. Maybe it was stress. Maybe my brain, overloaded with guilt and trauma, had conjured up the image. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. A few days later, I was talking to another long haul driver at a rest stop. I didn't mention the little girl, just casually asked if he'd ever seen anything strange on that stretch of highway. He looked at me, his face turning serious. "You mean the girl in the pink dress?" he asked. Chills ran down my spine. He told me he'd seen her too. Same spot, same expressionless face, same silence. And he wasn't the only one. Turns out, several drivers had reported seeing a small child standing alone by the road during rainy nights, always disappearing before anyone could reach her. Some believed it was the ghost of the girl from the accident I was in. Whether it was real or just collective trauma, I don't know. But one thing is certain. Some places carry the weight of what happened there. They remember. And sometimes those memories manifest in ways that defy explanation. Now, whenever I pass that highway, I drive a little slower. I keep my eyes on the shoulder, half expecting to see her again. And when the rain starts to fall, I whisper a quiet prayer for her family, and for all the souls still lingering out there, waiting to be noticed. The last call. It started with a phone call. I was about 6 hours into a night haul, somewhere in northern Nevada. The highway was empty, just endless asphalt cutting through a sea of black. The only light came from my headlights and the pale glow of the dashboard. My co-driver, Rick, was asleep in the bunk behind me. We had traded shifts just after sunset, and I was alone with my thoughts and the low hum of the road. That's when my phone rang. It startled me, not because of the noise, but because no one ever called me this late, especially not when I was on the road. I glanced at the screen. No caller ID. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello," I said. At first there was nothing, just static. Then I heard it, a faint voice, barely audible over the crackling line, a woman's voice whispering something I couldn't quite make out. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my eyes on the road. The whispering continued, clearer now. "Help me, please." A chill ran down my spine. "Where are you?" I asked, heart starting to race. But the call cut out. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before tossing it onto the passenger seat. Probably a prank, or a cross signal from somewhere. I told myself to forget it and just focus on the drive. But I couldn't. About 30 minutes later, I passed an old rest area, one of those forgotten ones with cracked pavement, overgrown weeds, and a single flickering streetlight. As I drove by, I swear I saw someone standing by the payphone. A woman, pale, still, holding the receiver. I hit the brakes and reversed slowly, headlights sweeping across the parking lot. She was gone. I pulled in, got out, and walked toward the phone booth. The air felt heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. I picked up the dangling receiver. It was warm. Suddenly, the payphone started ringing in my hand. I froze. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" I whispered. Silence. Then the same whisper. "Help me, he's coming." I dropped the phone and stumbled back. My heart was pounding in my ears. I turned, ran back to the truck, and drove off without looking back. Rick stirred awake about an hour later, rubbing his eyes. "Everything good?" he asked groggily. I didn't say anything at first. Then I just nodded. "Yeah, just tired." I never told him what happened. I barely believed it myself. A few days later, out of curiosity, I looked up the rest stop. Turns out it had been closed for years, after a woman was abducted there. She had managed to call 911 from the payphone, whispering for help before the line went dead. They never found her. Now truckers say her spirit still lingers, trying to finish that last call, hoping someone will answer in time. I still drive through Nevada sometimes, and every now and then, in the dead of night, my phone will ring. No caller ID. I don't answer anymore. Truckers have a saying. If you're ever near mile marker 313 after midnight, don't stop, no matter what you see. I used to laugh at that. I've been driving long-haul routes for over a decade now. I've seen my fair share of strange things, Shapes in the fog that vanish when you blink, shadows that move just a second too late, even stories about haunted diners and cursed way stations. Most of it is just trucker lore, something to keep us entertained on endless highways. But what happened near mile marker 313? That wasn't a story. It was late September when I got the route, Texas to Arizona, passing straight through the New Mexico desert. The schedule was tight, so I opted for the overnight drive. Less traffic, more speed, fewer distractions. I left around 6 p.m., the sky bleeding red behind me as I hit the open road. A few hours in, I was deep in the desert. No lights, no exits, just darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. The kind of black that swallows your headlights and makes the stars seem like they're watching. I turned off the radio. Even my favorite stations crackled and died out in that dead zone. I checked the dash clock. 12:03 a.m.s. That's when I saw the sign, mile marker 313. The instant I passed it, my truck's cabin felt colder. I figured maybe the AC had kicked on too strong, but when I glanced at the control, it hadn't changed. That's when I saw her. She was standing just ahead on the right shoulder of the road, alone. Her long white dress rippled in the wind. Her posture was still, too still. Her head was slightly lowered, hair draped over her face like a curtain. I slowed instinctively. My headlights swept over her, and for a second she didn't even blink. She didn't flinch, didn't look up, just stood there. At first I thought maybe she was in trouble, stranded, maybe. I pulled onto the shoulder, flipped on my hazard lights, and grabbed my flashlight. As I stepped out, the silence hit me. It wasn't just quiet, it was dead quiet. No wind, no insects, just the soft ticking of my engine cooling. "Ma'am," I called out. "You all right?" No response. I took a step forward. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. She turned her head. Not all the way, just enough for me to glimpse part of her face through the strands of hair. Her skin looked gray, bloated, like water-damaged paper, and her eyes, I don't like thinking about her eyes. They were wide, too wide, and they didn't blink. My flashlight flickered, then died. Panic surged up my spine. I turned, stumbling back toward the truck. I climbed in and slammed the door shut, locked it, fumbled to start the engine. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the keys. I looked up. She was standing at the passenger side window, face pressed against the glass. But her mouth, it wasn't moving. It was smiling. I screamed and floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching on the asphalt. The truck roared forward, and I didn't dare look in the mirrors. Not until the lights of a distant rest stop came into view. I pulled in, heart racing, breath shaky. There was another truck parked there, a dusty old Peterbilt. An older man was leaning against it, sipping coffee from a thermos. He looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "You all right, son?" I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. "Saw something back near 313. His expression dropped. He looked down at his cup and sighed. "White dress?" "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "She's been there a long time. Died waiting for her husband. Story goes they were newlyweds. He was drafted, went to war. She promised she'd wait for him. Car broke down one night near that marker. She was never found." I didn't respond. I just sat on the bench near the vending machines, staring at the black highway beyond. The man lit a cigarette. "You're lucky," he said. "Some folks stop and don't come back." I still take that route sometimes, though never at night and never near midnight. But the strangest part, every year on the same date, I get a missed call on my phone at 12:03 a.m., no caller ID, no voicemail, no message, just the echo of something that shouldn't exist. The road keeps its secrets, but sometimes it whispers. And if you listen too closely, you might not come back either.